Welcome to the Good Divorce Show. Not every divorce needs to end in disaster. It's time to see divorce in another perspective. Here to help with that is your host, Karen McNinney.
Hello, and thank you for joining me today here on the Good Divorce Show, where we help you find a path to your own good divorce. And today is really unique because I have mother and daughter on the show. We're welcoming Maggie Hickox. Hello, Maggie, and her daughter, Cara Dami. Thank you both for taking part of your time together to discuss the journey. And this is unique because we've not had a parent and adult child come on to the show and share those perspectives between parent and child and the journey of the divorce and what that looks like, which now the divorce in question that we're going to talk about was what, 30 years ago?
About 40.
40 years ago? Yeah. Maggie, give us a little background. You and your husband at the time, Bill, had been married just shy of 10 years and a couple of daughters. What else do we need to know about those early stages? And when you met, I think people are always curious, were you high school sweethearts? Did you meet on a blind date and get married 10 days later?
Actually, he was a customer at the bank I worked at. And he also worked for the same company that my father worked at. And I was 22 at the time, and he was 30, 31. He was 8.5 years older than me. So we were married a year and a half before she came along. So.
And Cara?
Yep, so I'm the eldest, and I have one sister who is 3 years younger than me. Her name is Corey.
And so life is moving along, as one would suspect, new young family, and taking us up to, those early days and that decision of there's going to be a dissolution of the marriage. And Cara, did you and your sister have any sort of idea or hint? I think sometimes we have this belief that our kids don't hear and see as much as they do.
We definitely witnessed them not getting along, just sort of struggling to communicate, arguing. I wouldn't say it was ever like too crazy, but I just remember it just seemed like there was tension and frustration and something going on.
Did it ever occur to you that your parents might get divorced?
I don't think I really thought along that. I think it occurred to me more after, once they told us. I was like, okay, that actually makes sense, kind of. Because I've been seeing and hearing. It was more kind of how it came about for me.
And I think that's a great reminder to our listeners that, as parents, we try to protect our children from so much, but they know. And if they don't actually know, they just start making stuff up. And our imaginations and stories can get really wild. So there's a certain almost relief and comfort in like, oh, here's the truth of it. And yes, that does make sense. Maggie, would you agree that Cara's sense of tension and discord in the house, was that accurate in your experience as well?
Extremely. The tension was, and I think my age had a lot to do with it. I didn't know how to communicate well. And I take a lot of the blame for that because he was older and he could speak his mind, and I wasn't able to do it. So
it's so gracious of you to take ownership in that way, even all these decades later. And, we all recognize there are two people in a marriage, probably having very different experiences of that marriage, but we all contribute in our own way and have fingerprints on the final outcome. Without sharing, the private, precious parts of your personal life, can you talk a little bit about what was going on for you in terms of leading up to the decision to leave the marriage?
Well, I was a stay-at-home mom for the most part, and I felt like there was nothing there for me except my two children. He traveled. I never felt that he was there for me, and sometimes not for the girls.
And in the 70s, two girls who at the time, Cara, how old were you when when you came to learn about the divorce?
9? Was I 9? I think Corey was
Six,
she was
around
6,
somewhere around
yeah.
6 and 9.
Yeah.
So just starting elementary school, kindergarten, second grade, somewhere in that neighborhood. And being a stay-at-home mom, do you recall some of your fears and hesitations around making this decision, Maggie?
Nobody ever wants to break up a family.
No.
This is a stability for children that age. But it was to the point where I was so unhappy, I believe I was starting to make my daughters unhappy. And I think that was probably one of my prime decisions to do this, because I didn't want my children to be unhappy.
Boy, again, one of those divorce mantras, stay for the children, stay for the children. And I've heard it said, I need to leave for the children. I need to be a different kind of parent and a different kind of partner to model that for my children.
I had to leave for me to be a better mother, because I was actually falling into depression.
Mm,
And you can't be a good mother when you're like that.
no. Do you actually have memories of that, Kara? Or as you reflect back now as an adult, do you see that shift and change in your mom pre-divorce, post-divorce?
Definitely. Yeah, for sure. And it's kind of like I mentioned before, I don't think until I was much older I could have peeled back the onion layers on the intricacies of it. But at that point in time, it was seeing somebody happy who previously wasn't happy. And so when I saw that, I knew it started to click into place. Okay.
Hmm.
You know, when I saw my parents, both of them, move into a place of happiness.
Yeah. And would you say as a result that your experience as a young person, having just more happy adults in your life, was beneficial?
Yeah, hugely, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of looking back on it now. Again, I don't think I would have necessarily been able to put the words to it, but in some ways we became a better family. We became more of a family. When
I do want to hear more about that.
With, you know, just a stronger family, I guess, a healthier family. It felt like, you know, they treated each other better once they decided to,
for sure,
get a divorce.
And you agree with that, Maggie?
Absolutely.
Do you have a theory of how and why that works that way?
Probably because I was so unhappy. I was making everybody unhappy. And when I got out, I could communicate better with him. We had to talk. We had to talk about the kids and finances. And I didn't communicate well.
So there was a transformation, not only of the family, but of the individuals inside the family.
Absolutely.
So at some point, the decision becomes clear. This marriage is going to dissolve. And then the really dreaded conversation, how will we tell our children and how will they respond? Maggie, can you unpack and unfold how that came about in your household?
Well, it was my first big divorce mistake. I told the girls without him, and he was angry. We were supposed to do it together. I did not think about it. I didn't know it. I just kind of plunged in. We were in the car driving, and, you know, I just kind of.
Out it came. Had you made a plan together to talk to the kids?
No.
Or you're retrospectively like, oh, yeah, we probably should have done it together, but we didn't really have any kind of plan. So the moment presented itself and out it came.
Yes.
What do you remember from that moment, Kara? You know how people talk about how smells can bring back like memories or nostalgia or whatever. It's it's kind of similar to that. It's like it was sort of just a visceral feeling. I remember being in the car. I remember driving. I can kind of picture even like the area outside of Chicago that we were driving in. Because I think, and I think that some of those little details just come in because it was just like, whoa, wait, what? We're not going to be together in the same house anymore? Okay, wait, this is big. So I think I have those acute details that I remember because of that moment, because it kind of hit me hard, and not that I wouldn't say I was overcome with sadness or anything. It was just more like, okay, this is strange. I hadn't pictured what this would look like.
Sure. And the fact that even, 40 years later, 30, 20, 10 days, I'm always reminding the families that I work with that you're writing a story. Let's be very intentional and thoughtful about it, because the day in which you tell the kids, the words you use, the location, that is forever embedded in them. That is a story they will forever carry with them and at times repeat. So Maggie, let's not have any shame, judgment on anyone. These are uncharted territories. And nobody knows, frankly, how to get divorced or how to do it right, which is part of what we're trying to shift here in the conversation around the good divorce. If you were to do it different in retrospect, what comes to mind now with all the years of wisdom and rearing your children?
Well, it comes back to communication. I didn't communicate well. That was one little step towards me being able to sit down and talk with him, to talk with Bill and say, because we had decisions to make about what their futures were and, even who's going to take them clothes shopping and who's going to. So that was my first step towards, I learned from that mistake. And I would definitely have done it as a sit down with all four of us together.
My sister Corey, she was 3 years younger, so she was 6, and I don't really have any memory of us unpacking it like together at that point in time. We were close and definitely spent a ton of time together, and I think just having each other was, like, physically and emotionally, was the big thing. Not that we were processing in any of that behind the scenes. I think just the fact that we had each other and that we were close was that processing, is how that played out.
That the relationship, I think, gets even more galvanized often, and particularly kids that are shuffling between homes. What we forget is that now the primary relationship isn't necessarily parent-child, it's sibling. They're the person that goes on the road trip, that is in both homes, that is the constant, because the parent is no longer the everyday constant in some cases.
I couldn't agree more. I don't always have the best long-term memory. My sister's is much better than mine. But I do remember, I remember being in the car with her, and, back seat, going back and forth, or being with one parent or the other. Like those moments together were huge.
Mm-hmm. And such a gift to have each other. Well, beyond that initial conversation in the car, the story continued. And not only did you find new love, Maggie, but also your former spouse, Bill, found new love, and the family continued to grow. And when we get back from the break, we're going to hear more from Kara and Maggie, our mother-daughter duo today, talking about the decades-long journey of the decision of divorce, and reminding all our listeners that those other millions of micro decisions along the way cast a very long shadow over the course of people's lives. Stay tuned.
Follow Voice America at Facebook.com/Voice America for juicy updates from your favorite radio shows and podcasts.
Voice America Network proudly presents The Catherine Zox Show for women, men, children, and families. Catherine magically combines her compassion, experience, and talent to bring listeners a show that's upbeat, informative, and yes, a little sassy. Tune in every Wednesday at 7 a.m. Pacific Time, 10 a.m. Eastern to The Catherine Zox Show on the Voice America channel.
Tune in to The Patricia Raskin Show on VoiceAmerica.com every Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time and 11 a.m. Pacific Time. This is the program that helps you turn obstacles into opportunities, challenges into solutions, and find answers to tough questions with the award-winning powerhouse voice of radio, Patricia Raskin. So tune in and call in to The Patricia Raskin Show, Mondays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time and 11 a.m. Pacific Time, right here on the Voice America Variety Channel.
Sports continues to grow and evolve to ever-increasing prominence in today's society. On All Around Sports, host John Inglesby will connect with the leading newsmakers from the sports world, including players, owners, and fellow sports journalists, discussing the top news and events that are relevant to sports today. John will also report from and offer his experience of the world's top sports events. Tune into All Around Sports with John Inglesby, Mondays at noon Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific, on the Voice America Variety Channel. A little birdie told me Voice America is on Twitter. Follow us at Voice America TRN.
Streaming live, the leader in Internet talk radio, VoiceAmerica.com.
Welcome back to The Good Divorce Show with Karen McNinney. Have a question for Karen or her guest? Join us on the show at 866-472-5788. That's 866-472-5788. Now, back to the show with Karen.
Welcome back, listeners. We are chatting today with Kara and Maggie, mother-daughter duo, and just reflecting on, Maggie's decision in the mid-70s to leave her marriage at right around the 10-year mark, 2 daughters, 6 and 9 years old, Kara being the eldest of those siblings. So you and Bill, then, Maggie, had to sit down and start having some new conversations about how you were going to raise these children in partnership still across 2 homes. What were the highlights that you recall from that time?
We actually did a couple counseling sessions.
Awesome.
And his was more towards trying to save the marriage. Mine was more towards trying to make it an amicable departure, which worked out. But basically, we would, and you communicated. We did not have text. We had to sit down together. There was no getting around. So I think that was really helpful, that you had to go face to face to discuss logistics, if nothing else. But anyway, yeah, we sat down face to face, and I think that was a really good thing to do.
I do believe that the things we say face to face are different than the things we say behind our screens. We call this keyboard courage, which is usually not very courageous. It's actually usually the opposite, and we text and email, and it's one-sided. So good for you to come together. And what was the decision, Kara? What was the announcement of how you were going to live this new life?
We spent Sundays with my dad. So we lived the majority of the time with my mom, and then would just visit him for one weekend day. And then I don't remember, you split up holidays, and we kind of shared that. We would do, vacations here and there with my dad. I don't remember. You probably, if there was a specific structure to it, I don't remember. I just know that it was kind of spatterings of time there.
Well, my family's really simple. We don't have to have Christmas on the 25th of December. We have it on the 26th. So it was easy to for myself and my family to have Thanksgiving on Saturday. Holidays were really easy.
Also, during the school year, you lived in one home. Were you in the same town?
20 minutes, half-hour drive?
Oh, at the most.
Yeah.
In traffic.
Depending on traffic.
Always depending on traffic. And now there was a period of time, Maggie, I'm guessing that you were really a single parent.
Yes. I had to get a job. I mean, that was the worst part. Actually, the girls were so easy. For the most part, I was blessed at those early ages. They helped me through it. You know, they were there for me. And I think we had a pretty easy time of it.
And you had to go out and get a job. And again, in that era, in that generation, it's not uncommon. And I think a lot of women in particular, although it can certainly happen with men as well, you almost feel held hostage by your marriage because if I'm not here, what am I going to do? How will I support myself? What did you end up doing? What was your professional journey post-divorce?
I don't know how professional it was, but I was an administrator in a real estate office.
It all counts, Maggie. It all counts out there supporting your children and yourself. It's very impressive. And it's a big, courageous leap to take that on.
I enjoyed it. So, and a little flexibility was involved. You know, if I had to take off and, you know, get one of the girls to a doctor's appointment or something, they were very, very helpful with that. So good gift at that time.
And not only did you go searching for a job and a career and a way to support you and your daughters, but you also decided to go searching for love again, or maybe love found you. But I would love to hear from both of you a bit about how this new person emerged in the family and the role that he played for all of you.
He was actually a friend. I met him afterwards. I had another part-time job in a video store, and he had pizzeria out front. And when he learned about the divorce, you know, he had an old table he gave to me, and, you know, he helped move that in and helped me a lot. You know, he even brought us a Christmas tree that first year.
The rest was history.
Yeah. And then just kind of grew.
And is Rob still in the picture?
Yes, we've been married. Well, it'll be 38 years in September.
Congratulations. And what do you remember of Rob showing up early on in the scene, Kara?
He was a pretty fun guy. I remember him. He liked to play the drums. He was really into playing the drums. He was really into classic rock. I was like, thought to myself, this guy's pretty cool. I found a pretty cool guy.
Took you to your first concert.
I know, he did. He took me to lots of concerts. He's so great. You know, the first, for me, really, though, all jokes aside, my mom was happy. I saw my mom happy. And it was in those moments where, you know, I knew that, you know, my mom and dad, you know, as they were divorcing, I knew that things weren't great and they were having hard time and, you know, had heard arguing and stuff. But it wasn't really until I saw my mom happy with another person that it sunk in for me. Like, oh, wow. Okay. This is a good thing. This is better. This feels better. I might not have fully understood why it was better at that time, but I could see it was better for her, and it felt better for my sister and I too.
Oh, that's such a beautiful sentiment and such a beautiful gift that you're offering up to our listeners. For those who are wondering, divorce is only going to damage my children. That is a myth. It is not a truth. And Maggie, clearly you went out as you were, you know, considering bringing someone into the family and a new partner with fresh eyes. What was the new lens? And did you feel hesitation, excitement as you thought about repartnering?
Actually, I was scared.
I bet.
Well, I mean, I kept questioning, am I going to feel this way in 10 years? Am I going to have to go through this again? I was very hesitant and I was very scared, but he's a really good man. I'm very spoiled. So at any rate, no, it was lovely. Absolutely lovely.
And is there anything you can point to that you were bringing with you from your first marriage and that experience into, here's my list of do's and don'ts if I were to do it again?
My biggest is if there's an issue, don't try to sweep it under the rug. Face it head on, discuss it, because if you try to ignore things, which I did in my first marriage, because I didn't want to upset anybody, if we had something going on, We hit it right on. Yeah, that was the most, because that was my biggest failure in the first marriage. Was I'm a bad communicator. So.
Yeah. And feeling, in a new relationship that sounds like there was more capacity, emotionally safe, trusting, and that you were bringing a new version of yourself to your second marriage.
When I was 10, 11 years older.
Yes.
I wasn't 22 years old.
It's amazing what the wisdom of time will do for all of us. And so now, Kara, there's this new father figure in your life. And I'm curious how that impacted your relationship with your biological father, Bill, and still having kind of those weekend and vacation time visits. And you and your sister were heading into the teen years as stepdad Rob was showing up. How did it go?
This is one of the things that I have so much respect for my parents towards my parents for, excuse me. And that is that now they're humans, and I know, and I definitely learned later once I was older and we could kind of get to the nitty gritty a little bit more about emotions and frustrations and feelings that they kind of had to work through in those early years after the divorce. But my dad showed nothing but respect for Rob. He would say all the time that he seemed like a really great guy, and from what he knew of him, he was, and then he was really good for my mom. And my dad was awesome about it. He was, it made it feel really good. And, he might have had some things that he was working through, but at that time and at our ages, he didn't pull us into that. That was his stuff, not our stuff. And I have a lot of respect for that. And it's not because I don't think we should be dishonest or keep the truth, but now that I am a parent, I know that there are just some things that are mine that are weights that my kids don't necessarily need to carry. Mm-hmm.
And that's a truth, whether we're married or divorced. Yeah. And sometimes in the divorce process, we turn into these like hyper truth-telling beings that we think, I'm keeping secrets from my kids. Well, I'm not going to lie to them. Well, I'm not going to be deceptive. And we all know the story. There are the things that we tell and the things we don't tell. And so that's why the reminder is, deception is different than discretion.
Exactly.
And adult discretion is a superpower that we should exercise, particularly when we're having strong feelings about our former spouse or their new partners. Maggie, was it hard for you? Because you also saw then Bill go on and remarry Kareen.
I was really happy for him.
Say more.
Well, honestly, it took some of my guilt off that he was happy. And I carried guilt. And when I saw him remarry and become more and more successful in his job, which he loved, I think it was wonderful.
Because even though you didn't want to be married to him, it sounded like you did want him to have happiness in the same way that you wanted it for yourself.
Of course.
And this isn't,
and he was a really good man.
And you referenced that even on his deathbed, he was trying to work, because the truth that our listeners don't realize yet is that Bill did pass away about a decade ago.
Yep, 2013.
Mm-hmm. And when we come back from our break, we're going to hear a little bit more about that journey and these other layers of grief and loss and family transformation, and the family that Bill also then chose and invited into his life when he married Kareen, including 2 additional children, your step-siblings. To you, Kara. So listeners, please stay with us. There's more to unfold with Maggie and Kara.
Enjoying our shows and can't get enough of us? Follow us on Instagram at Voice America Talk Radio and see what we're cooking up for you.
Planning for college? Tune in to Getting In, a college coach conversation for tips, techniques, and insider perspectives. Hosted by Bright Horizons College Coach, a team of former admissions and financial aid officers, the show takes a deep dive on subjects such as choosing the best essay topic, negotiating merit aid, and navigating the Common App. Listeners will learn what really goes into college acceptance decisions from the experts who used to make them. New episodes drop Thursdays on the Voice America Variety Channel.
If you're looking for a break from everyday life and want to keep yourself occupied with a fun and quirky show, tune into Musings of a Superdoer with Christina Kendall. Christina and her guests are sure to entertain you with their topics on investing, parenting, working, writing, reading, loving, giving, and all the other things that keep them busy. Musings of a Superdoer, Fridays at 2 p.m. Pacific on the Voice America Variety Channel.
Psych Up Live with host Dr. Suzanne Phillips offers a psychological perspective on coping with common and current life issues. This show addresses topics as varied as marital stress, insomnia, depression, raising teens, campus violence, and building self-resilience. Listen in as Dr. Phillips and her guest experts share the latest in books, findings, and information that will inform and enhance your life journey. Psych Up Live is heard every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Variety Channel. Want to see what Voice America is up to behind the scenes? Follow us on TikTok at Voice America Talk Radio.
Stimulating talk.
Gets those synapses in the brain firing really fast.
All the time. The #1 internet talk station where your opinion counts. VoiceAmerica.com.
Welcome back to The Good Divorce Show with Karen McNinney. Have a question for Karen or her guests? Join us on the show at 866-472-5788. That's 866-472-5788. Now, back to the show with Karen.
Hello, listeners. Thank you so much for staying with us today as we talk with Kara and her mother, Maggie, about the long divorce journey, decades old now, but still it leaves a remnant because it has fingerprints all over the people that were involved. And Maggie, you were talking about even just your almost relief and delight when your former husband remarried Corinne, came with two children. And in some ways it lifted the guilt that you had. And more than just, the guilt, I'm leaving this marriage, but it was also the man you were leaving and the story of his history and how the impact of this divorce really could have had such a negative ricochet. And Kara, even as an adult child of divorce, you have an appreciation of that. What was it that you knew about your dad and what your mom and he did that, well, you describe it as a stable divorce?
Yeah, I do. I think that my dad was an only child, and it was just him and his mom. His dad left when he was really young, and there really aren't a lot of details there, and he never heard from his dad again. And so there wasn't a ton of family on my dad's side. I did have a non-biological grandpa who was not married to my grandma. They were just kind of together for a lot of years. So I just think that if, my parents really handled the divorce so well, and they stayed in each other's lives, and, they'd both come to birthday parties, or like my mom tells the story of my dad coming to one of her family reunions. We were still a family, right? And based on my dad's, past, I sometimes think back now with my adult glasses on, looking back, like if he didn't have that, if the divorce wasn't stable, that would have been, I think, so hard for him, and I think it really helped him too, that we all were able to stay together as a family.
Maggie, you had him to your family reunion. What was it like to make those decisions of continuing to share space with him?
He was the father of my children. He's family. No, you can't look at it any other way. My parents liked him. My brothers, my sisters, they all liked him. They were all at, well, my parents weren't at his funeral because they were gone, but all my siblings were there.
So these stepchildren. So you're really the one, Kara, then that was, invited, thrust into a blended family, but kind of semi-blended.
Right. So then my dad did eventually meet Corrine, and they eventually got married, and she had 2 children, and they were like high school, sort of end of high schoolish age when they came into our world. So they were older than my sister and I. And it kind of the same thing happened when I watched my dad go through that and find happiness for himself. The same sort of thing, and maybe even not more so, but in a different way, because we did spend so much time with my mom, and my dad was living alone for most of the week. And it was so great to see him then build, or, then have all of a sudden this other family or extended family for me, because it's like his house filled up, his life filled up again. And it's not that my sister and I weren't part of his life, but it was cool to see his daily life, his weekly life expand. And like with my mom, to see him be happy was great.
And did you ever live in the same home with the step siblings, Eric and Carrie? Or was it more of a cousin relationship that sometimes we see each other on trips and gatherings?
Because of the age difference, and because we didn't really spend a ton of time living at my dad's house, and we're just primarily there on Sundays. And as we started to get older and have more activities of our own, sometimes we wouldn't even do that as much. So then we just kind of have to make different times to see my dad, like go out to dinner on a night, or, something, just carve out different times as we got older. So no, I mean, we never really had that opportunity to get super close like you do when you're living under the same someone.
And I think it's really unique because I hear you saying you weren't resentful of your dad for kind of bringing this new family into his life. You also were celebrating that for your dad.
Yeah, I definitely was. Of course, it's kind of be uncomfortable and strange to like navigate those new waters of all of a sudden having I kind of have a brother and a sister that I don't really know and didn't know before. And now I'm, calling them my stepbrother and sister. So yeah, it's awkward. It's like you have growing pains for sure. But as a kid, I guess it's good to learn that lesson too, because that's a reality of life, whether we're talking about divorce or not.
It's so true. As we mentioned before the break, sadly, your father passed away a decade ago. And Maggie, you and your siblings and family were at the funeral, spoke, I believe. This is part of what Kara was kind of highlighting of her high respect. Can you tell us a little bit about that day and the complex feelings of your ex-husband dying, but then still showing up for him and his family, if you will?
It was very sad, but it was also joyful to the number of people whose lives he affected. I mean, it was a packed service. And that to me showed the world what a good man that he was. And I am grateful for the time I had with him. And I'm grateful for the 2 girls that I got.
And I think we forget there's a love story embedded in every divorce. Most, I can't say every, but I think more often than not, there is a love story. These children are born from love, and that we don't have to discard all of that when we discard the marriage. We really can hold on to some wonderful feelings and support and delight for this other person that at some point I very intentionally chose to marry and have children with.
And I think even so too, like as my sister and I got older, even before my dad died, we got a little bit of this from him and also from my mom. Like there'll be times, they'll just be honest. They'll be like, at one point in time, I can't think of a great example, like, your dad really frustrated me when he did this, or, like that kind of stuff. So as we got older, we started to hear some of the more real stories, like kind of like it wasn't all just roses. There were things that they were working through behind the scenes, like we mentioned before, that my sister and I weren't pulled into. But it's also nice as we've gotten older to be like, okay, yeah, I know you had to work at that. It wasn't, divorces take work, they take work.
Yes, as do marriages. And again, we always talk about fight for the marriage, get in the council. Well, we can also fight for the good divorce. Mm-hmm. And it is still a relationship that needs to be tended to. You're currently married, Kara. I'm sure there's days where you feel great frustration with your partner and husband. So whether we're married or divorced, there's moments and days that all humans are going to just irritate us.
Yes, for sure.
So now we come into this present day, and Corrine, who, played the role of stepmother during a chapter of your life, sadly also her son, Eric, passed away, and then her husband, your father, and the family morphs again. What does it look like today, those relationships?
Well, unfortunately, my stepmom and I don't really have much connection anymore. After my dad passed away, we kind of lost touch with each other. Nothing specific happened, but I mean, I think there are just layers there, and I probably don't even fully understand all those layers, but without the conduit of my dad there, something, just there was a fissure that kind of happened there.
And yet there is this other part of the family that has grown abundantly. And I am curious about your relationship with your stepdad. And did you ever feel like, there was the dad debates? Is there room for both in your life? What has Rob come to represent in your life as a young adult and adult?
Gosh, I don't know where I'd be without Rob. He is, when my dad was alive, he played a huge role. Rob was Rob is a huge communicator, maybe even a bit of an over communicator. And I say that with love, but, he would, say to my sister and I, he really tried to kind of move in slowly. He always said to us, I don't want to take the place of your dad. I'm not going to disrespect your dad. I don't want to step on your dad's toes. So I feel like there was a lot of years of him just kind of, and he didn't have his own biological kids. So, he had to learn how to be a parent. And that was a messy, beautiful, awesome journey for him too. You just all of a sudden, one day you are a parent to two girls that are whatever we were at that point in time.
8 and 10, 11, 9.
So that's, we had to give space for that too, even though as teenagers, that wasn't always easy to do, right? Because we were teenagers. But he was great about, just honoring my dad, and then trying to play his own support role in his own way. So I think that was really important. And then, as the years passed by and all of that stuff kind of faded away a little bit more, he was just my dad too. They were both my dads. And when I introduced Rob, if you don't know us super well, I'm just going to introduce him as my dad. He's just my dad. So, yeah, it's great, to have him in my world, and he's just been a huge support.
Mm-hmm. He introduced you to the mountains.
He did introduce me. He brought me out west. That's why everyone out here in Montana gets to enjoy my company.
Thanks to Rob. And Maggie, I'm curious, as that was happening and you talked about, not only the nervousness of starting a new relationship, but bringing someone into your family in this father figure role to your daughters. Were you coaching behind the scenes? Did you talk about this other dad business? What was your perspective of that journey?
No, I felt that they all had to work it out on their own. I mean, if I got in the middle of it, when they did have an argument, and all kids have arguments with their parents, when they did get into an argument, the worst thing I could do was get in the middle of it. I would try to walk away, let them figure it out.
So really gave them space to build their own relationship. And did you just feel secure in your heart that this man, because, we, as parents, we usually get to start with infants and work our way up to teenagers, but he was thrown into the fire and it sounds like came to it very naturally. Did you have concerns though? They're your precious daughters.
Oh, I absolutely had concerns. My goal in life is for my daughters to be happy. And I was very concerned that disrupting, changing would affect their stability, their happiness. So yeah, I was very concerned. But like I said, sometimes I just had to grit my teeth and stand back and let the cards fall where they may. And it worked out pretty much.
So, Kara, your sister Corey, who was a little bit younger than you, how do you think she would represent this experience? Similar or radically different?
She would have her own nuances to it. She would remember things differently than I do. She has a much better long-term memory than I do. So she probably has some like little details and nits and grits that maybe I just have blocked out or, don't remember. So I think that there is that. And I think for the most part, she, in terms of like our relationship with Rob and would have a very similar feeling. I mean, they had their own journey into getting to know each other and their own relationship, but I know she feels the same with me, and just in terms of the connection and the feeling of respect and love for him that I have, she has too.
Do you ever now regret or question your decision to divorce?
No. Do I question some of the ways I handled things? Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's...
As the process got on, we both learned, and that was a good thing. We were able to piece things together as we grew.
And I know you're sitting next to your daughter, but I'm going to ask the question, do you see long-term damage as a result of your divorce that in some way kept your own daughters from finding their happiness or their path or their own stability?
No, I don't believe I do. I think if they would have stayed in I want to say troubled marriage. I'm not going to say a bad marriage, but a troubled marriage where neither parent was happy and there was tension all the time. I think that would have been much more destructive.
And Kara, as you look back now as an adult child of divorce, what would you say to the parents that are sitting, listening, and are so worried about their children, so worried about the future might be, and in some ways may just feel stuck? What advice and wisdom would you offer up to those folks?
I would say that seeing your parents as a child, seeing your parents happy is everything. And it takes work to get to that, right? And when your kids see that, it's gonna be an incredible example for them that's attainable, and that we get to make these choices and do the work to be happy and find happiness. And so I think that that's an incredible thing that my parents modeled to us. And I think that the behind the scenes, like I know now that they were doing a lot of behind the scenes work to make us still feel safe and loved and a part of something. And when I was a kid, I know I'm a little bit of a broken record because I've said this multiple times now. We didn't know all the details of it, but it made all the difference because it's the family, the divorced family we were part of then still felt, we still felt loved. We still felt, like our parents were there for us and that they, even if they didn't want to be in a marriage anymore, that they respected each other or found ways to respect each other, even if that respect didn't come easy. Because at times it didn't come easy. There were frustrations. They're humans. So
beautifully spoken, wonderful sentiment. I know it will be so encouraging to those that are listening in to the Good Divorce Show today. Very special thanks to Cara Dami and her mom, Maggie Hickox, and sharing this part of your life. And always, listeners, as you go away today, remember, everything will be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's not the end.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of The Good Divorce Show. We hope today's episode has helped you find a kinder, more sensible, and less expensive path through the divorce journey. Until we talk again, have a beautiful week.